Hello everyone. This is chapter 31 from my contemporary romance novel Under A Namibian Sky. In this, the last chapter, we visit Venice with Luca and Naomi as they spend a week there on their honeymoon before travelling to Modena and to the home that Luca hopes Naomi would come to love. But can she fit into his life? When the sun threw its long shadow fingers on the ground and over the buildings, Luca and Naomi stood next to the jet, ready to leave. In front of them, the entire team of Desert Lodge's staff had come to say goodbye. Kerry, ever efficient, had arranged that the staff walk past Luca and Naomi in single file to allow each person to shake their hands and to give them their messages of goodwill. Otayan came at the end of the long line, his wrinkly face beaming, but tears stood in his eyes as he hugged Naomi and gave Luca an extra long African handshake. Then Kerry and Johan gave their final hugs and stood away from the jet, Johan's arm around Kerry's shoulders. Luca pulled up the ladder and shut the door, while Naomi waved from the window next to her seat. Everyone waved until the jet was too far away to see their friends any longer. Naomi sighed and leaned back in her seat, putting her head on the headrest. Luca glanced at her. "Are you okay, Mrs. Armati?" She turned her head, smiled at him, and stroked the top of his arm. "I'm more than okay, Mr. Armati." At Eros Airport, they changed aircraft. Staff transferred their luggage, and Luca led Naomi onto his private jet. It was much larger and more luxurious than the small Cessna jet he'd used to fly to and from Desert Lodge. Naomi watched as Luca performed all kinds of checks and talked to the aircraft control tower. It took about an hour, and then they were off. A tiny butterfly fluttered in Naomi's stomach at the thought that she was now on her way to her new life. Shortly after they were airborne, she got up and found them something to drink and eat in the well-stocked kitchen at the rear of the jet. She meant to do her bit to help keep Luca awake for the 16-hour flight. But when she opened her eyes, Luca was landing at Venice's Marco Polo airport. Disappointment washed through her that she'd missed the sight of coming in over Venice. "You should have woken me up, Mr. Armati." Luca glanced at her. "But you were sleeping so peacefully, Mrs. Armati, and you were snoring." "I don't snore," Luca grinned. "No, you just sleep very loudly." Naomi had never imagined that she might snore. "Oh my God, are you sure? Have I been snoring this whole time, and you're only telling me now?" Luca's grin widened. "No, Mrs. Armati, I'm only teasing." But Naomi wasn't so sure. Knowing Luca, he may just have been polite. She knew Auntie Elsa used to snore when she was tired. As Naomi had been up since before dawn the previous day, she may very well have been snoring. How unsexy. Especially since she'd never heard Luca snore in the time they'd shared a bed. Venice was a wonder. The moment they alighted, all thoughts of snoring left Naomi's thoughts. The tangy, salty scent of the place and the humidity on her skin became sensations to appreciate. Luckily, the seasons were just changing into summer here. Naomi could only imagine how sticky it could get in high summer, when the humidity higher than today, and the tourists cramming the narrow streets. Luca had told her those were called Calais. The boat that greeted them ploughed through the pale water surrounding the city. Naomi's eyes widened as Venice rose higher out of the ocean ahead of them, like a sea serpent rising above the waters. It was a breathtaking sight. Luca put his arm around Naomi and grinned at the delight on his wife's face. Luca's family palazzo climbed from the water and towered above the other buildings that surrounded it. Luca led Naomi inside, where she couldn't tear her eyes from the intricate paintings on the ceilings. She turned around and around as Luca steered her gently further into the palazzo. Luca was watching her face. He couldn't imagine the impact being here had on Naomi. She'd never been out of Africa before. He understood that Venice was overwhelming, even for Italians who came here on vacation. He tried to see it through her eyes. The age of the city had to impress, though nothing compared to the ancient desert that had been her home. Venice was more than 1,000 years old, and then there was its otherness, as though being here was suddenly being transported to another world, an ancient world of water and marble, art and intrigue, and the ghosts of decadence. Venice had always made Luca feel slightly dizzy with joy. The huge room was on the top floor, where Naomi could admire the canals and the other palazzos around them. She'd brought along only a few pieces of clothing. When Luca had suggested that she bought a whole new wardrobe for Italy, as it would save her flying back and forth with a lot of luggage, it had made sense. Since it was lunchtime, Luca suggested a quick lunch before a short shopping spree. He explained that the shops and restaurants closed at 3 o'clock for the siesta and only opened again at 7 o'clock. By the time they returned to the palazzo, carrying many colourful bags of new clothes for her, Naomi was bone-tired. She couldn't even imagine how exhausted Luca had to be, since he'd flown the jet for those many hours. They headed straight for their bed and collapsed on it without taking off their clothes first. As they would visit Venice for 1 week only, Luca did his best to show Naomi the Venice he knew, the Venice of his childhood. Naomi fell more and more in love with the places as it revealed itself to her, as Luca took her to the secret, out-of-the-way places only Venetians knew. Each palazzo contained its own courtyard where lush plants grew, and its private roof gardens where even more plants grew. Naomi thought it was wonderful and romantic and felt as though she was inside a film. She delighted in her own little game of spotting the more exotic places that contained these mini oases. Their time in Venice flew by, and before she knew it, it was time to leave for Modena, her new forever home in Italy. The evening before they were due to leave, Naomi remembered she had promised to Skype Kerry from Venice. She texted Kerry to make sure she was available. She was. Luca gave Naomi his laptop and dutifully disappeared from the lounge, giving her privacy as she chatted with her best friend. Kerry spoke the moment she could see Naomi. "Oh my God, you look amazing. Tell me everything, don't leave anything out." Naomi giggled at Kerry's outrageous request, but she tried to give as detailed a description of Venice and their time there as she could. She stood up and turned the laptop so Kerry could see as much of the palazzo as possible. "Oh, it looks amazing! You lucky, lucky woman, hun. But you so deserve it. I'm so happy for you. You're off to Modena tomorrow. How do you feel about that?" Slightly trepidatious. "I'll be going to my new life, and I don't know what's expected of me." Kerry became serious. "Naomi, hun, nothing is expected of you other than you being yourself. Luca married you, not some version he wants you to become. And Santina will be there. Give her my love, will you? And to Enzo too. You'll be fine. And if you have any problems, you just call me, okay?" Naomi felt much better after the conversation with Kerry. She hadn't realized exactly how anxious she'd been about going to her new life and her new home. But Kerry was right. Luca had married her for who she was. As they boarded the water taxi the next morning to take them back to Marco Polo Airport, Naomi cast one last glance at the city she'd come to love so quickly. Luca was watching her. "We can come back any time you want, Mrs. Armati. Modena isn't that far away. It will take less than 2 hours to fly to Bologna. It's our nearest airport, and then just about 45 minutes drive from there to Modena. So you see, we're very close to Venice." Naomi smiled at Luca. She was so grateful for his continued sensitivity. He'd been especially attentive to her this morning. She blushed pink when she thought of all the attention he'd paid her. She leaned over and gave him a quick, soft kiss. "Thank you, Mr. Armati. I'll hold you to it." Luca was true to his word. Expertly, he flew the jet to Bologna's airport, where an even more amazing Armati supercar awaited them than the one they'd used in Windhoek. This car was one of Luca's own Armatis. The drive from Bologna took exactly 40 minutes by Naomi's reckoning. As they drove over the rolling hills into Modena, the first thing Naomi saw was the giant silver statue of the Armati logo, which was proudly displayed at the entrance of the city. Luca saw her expression of awe. "Welcome to the land of Parma ham, balsamic vinegar, and the world's most supercars." "You mean there are more supercar manufacturers here than Armati?" "Oh yes, Mrs. Armati. Unfortunately, we're not as exclusive as you might want to believe we are. Maserati, Ferrari, Lamborghini and Pagani all have their factories here. There used to be others like Bugatti." Modena was nothing like Naomi had expected. She couldn't contain the exclamation that interrupted Luca's listing of supercar manufacturers. "Wow!" The medieval city, surrounded by lush green countryside, where ancient, neat chimney stacks peeked out over woods, more than met her expectations. Farming, it appeared, lived side by side with the advanced industry that several supercar manufacturers brought to the area. In the distance, Naomi noticed a castle. As Luca continued driving toward it, she glanced nervously at him. He said his house was big. Luca saw her anxiety out of the corner of his eye. His grin widened, but he remained quiet, enjoying teasing her a little. He could almost hear her relief as they drove past the castle. They went a little further up the hill in front of them. As he came around the corner, on the private road, through the trees, stood the house he hoped she would come to call home. A huge 3-story stone building, it flaunted beautiful square windows, an impressive entrance, and a lovely garden with a fountain at its centre. Luca drove around the garden on the paved driveway and stopped in front of the entrance. Turning to smile at Naomi, he took her hand and kissed her fingers. Then he got out and quickly walked around the car to help her out of the low-slung vehicle. Together they walked up the steps. Naomi watched as her husband unlocked and opened the door. But just as she was about to walk through the door, he surprised her by picking her up and carrying her over the threshold. Inside, it was immediately cooler. A massive double staircase greeted her. He was right. There was a lot of marble. "Welcome home, Mrs. Armati." Naomi held on tight to her husband. She knew Luca meant the building, but for her, it was much more than that. With Luca, she had the family she'd always craved. Now her heart was full, filled up with love. She belonged to this amazing man, and he belonged to her. Naomi sighed against his chest. Yes, she was home, finally in his arms. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me and experiencing Luca and Naomi's world and their journey. Several readers had asked me what had happened to Naomi and Luca now that they're married and living in Italy. So to answer their questions, I wrote a follow-up novella called Love in Medina. It is available on Amazon and it's free with your subscription on Kindle Unlimited. So thank you so much for listening and for watching the series and for liking and sharing my videos. And most of all, thank you so enormously for subscribing to my channel. And if you haven't yet, there are other things coming and I'd love you to subscribe and to know when I'm posting next. And I'd also love it if you left comments. You know, there are so many things that I'm discussing through the chapters and through all the other things that I post, the videos of interviews with authors, and I talk about love and all sorts of things. I'd love to know your comments. So press the bell icon and then you'll be notified when I next upload the next video. Thank you so much. Until next time.